so I'm doing my recitation on Morgan's speech, which was on animal testing. Her main claim is that animal testing for scientific use is unnecessary and inhumane. Her secondary claims are: number one, animal studies do not reliably predict human outcome. Number two, animal testing is inhumane and demeaning to the animals being tested on. And number three, scientists should use alternate subjects. So going back to her first claim, which is that animal testing cannot accurately predict human outcome. She supports this by saying that less than 50% of cases of animal testing accurately predicted human outcome, and that there are actual cases where animal tested drugs still ended up killing people. However, she failed to mention that there are also certain cases where animal testing was not done and there were also detrimental effects. According to the Animal Testing and Medicine article published in the Journal of Gulf and Heart Association, in 1937, a drug known as elixir sulfonilamide, containing the solvent DEG, which is poisonous to humans, was distributed to the public. This resulted in mass poisoning and the death of over 100 people. And in a similar case that was also published in the same article in the late 1950s and early 1960s, the thalidomide, which was used to treat insomnia, coughs, colds, and headaches, was given to pregnant women. And what scientists didn't know was that thalidomide had negative effects on the unborn fetus. So this resulted in more than 10,000 children in 46 countries being born with birth defects and missing limbs. And in both of these cases, animal testing was not done on the drug beforehand. And had animal testing been conducted on the drug, scientists may have realized the negative effects of the drug and prevented the distribution of these drugs, and along with it, the consequential death and birth defects that the drugs caused. Therefore, although animal testing might not be able to accurately predict all of the possible effects of a drug on humans, it can predict some of the effects that may occur and prevent scientists from distributing dangerous and harmful drugs to humans. Moving to her second supporting claim, which was that animal testing is inhumane and demeaning to the animal being tested on. This is actually a claim of value and not a claim of fact. However, her support was a claim of fact, and her support was that the different animals experience pain differently, yet they're all being held to the same standard. This claim is actually false, and there are actually laws in the United States and other countries as well that specifically state that certain animals, specifically mammals, are held to different standards than other animals, such as the Animal Welfare Act, which sets the standards for animal testing in the U.S. According to the Animal Welfare Act in Subchapter A, an animal is defined as any live or dead dog, cat, non-human primate, guinea pig, hamster, rabbit, or any warm-blooded animal. This term excludes birds, rats, and mice. So this shows that there is a distinction between different animals and the treatment of these animals, because according to this law, cats, dogs, and monkeys are held to a higher standard than birds and some of the other smaller rodents. Therefore, the claim that all animals are held to the same standard is actually incorrect. Finally, in her third supporting claim, she claims that there are alternative subjects to animal testing, such as plant cells, single-cell organisms, and invertebrates that could replace animal subjects. However, the problem with this claim is that some alternatives are not able to produce the same results or as accurate results as animal test subjects. According to the article Alternatives to Animal Testing published by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, human and animal responses to toxicants are complex and difficult to accurately assess using only in vitro systems or computer models. In vitro systems being plant cells or animal cells or tissues that are kept in test tubes and used for scientific research. Scientists can use these alternative test methods, but currently they still need to integrate animal testing into the study in order to produce more accurate results, and they cannot solely depend on alternative test subjects. Therefore, contrary to my opponent's claim, animal testing is actually still needed in some scientific studies and research.
All the structural stuff is good. It's easy to follow. All three claims, as you get to them, you have particular counterclaims that you're talking about. There's a nice analysis of some of the advocate's explanation on the points, but there's not always an explanation of the advocate's evidence on those points. For example, on the first point, you largely ignore what the advocate's evidence was and offer counterclaims that suggest that there could, in fact, be harms if we didn't test on animals. A perfectly legitimate strategy. However, I think your argument would be stronger if you had been able to directly attack some of the examples that the advocate used as not being representative or typical, or that they are outliers, for instance, as opposed to more mainstream testing, which would get those results. I do think that you basically use the same strategy that the advocate used on these points. Let me give you examples about how animal testing could, in fact, save lives as opposed to it failed to save lives. So basically, I have on that first point the advocate's examples to evaluate in comparison to your examples to evaluate, and I'm still being asked to make a generalization by both speakers as to whether or not animal testing is required. I do think, however, that you had a good summary on that point, which was that animal testing can't stop all, but it can stop some. And I think that that's the right way to summarize that particular argument. On the second point, I think you are correct in dismissing a lot of the claim as value-based. There's an interesting point where you dispute whether or not the animals are treated the same, and you give us some good data about what the existing rules are. I think that that's pretty reasonable, but you do need to explain to us how that undermines the advocate's position on this point. Since you're largely dismissing the value issue, why does it matter what the difference is in pain levels or how it's managed for the different kinds of animals? I think there is a premise here that ultimately is going to be listened to, even though it's supposed to be a claim of fact, and that if you don't deal with that premise, there's going to be, a long-term ramification from the decision makers. On the third point, I think you did a pretty good job making the same kind of argument that you made on the first point, but in this particular situation, giving us an explanation and a contrast. I do think that you need to do a little bit more contrast with the advocate's evidence and reasoning and explain why your counterpoints are more valid, why the way they've reached their conclusions are less trustworthy, and not just present the counterclaims on these points. All right, thank you.